So this is the beginning of my presentation, The Path of Purpose, that I've been doing for a lot of time to different conferences around the area. So I will do a part of it that has to do with what's pertaining to the assignment as far as inclusion and equality, and it really is pertaining to these subjects. So this is me. When we start off and we're talking about things, we introduce ourselves in our language, and there's a few different reasons we do this, but it's so that my ancestors can talk to your ancestors and we can have a multi-dimensional conversation on the topic. So, Asanabe Indigenous cause, and that means that my Indian name is Asanabe. Asanabe Wanini means the rock man, and that's a Indian name that I was given by the medicine man when I was like 15 years old. And my English name is Everett Laframboise. And my Ingen Ndudum means that I am in the wolf clan. And when we get our clans, they come down from our father, and the clan system determines a lot of different things. Talks about like what your job is and what your strengths are. It is also talking about a spirit that steps up and helps you out when you need it. And I'm in the wolf clan. Mikanako Wijiwing Nindunjba means I'm from the Turtle Mountain Reservation in North Dakota, and I've lived in this area since I was about 12 years old. So this is the area I consider home, working in and around Fond du Lac and growing up in Cloquet. So I'm more familiar with this area than I am there, but since this is where I'm enrolled, this is how we introduce ourselves. This is the medicine wheel, and this is something that a lot of native cultures have in common. I know that the Anishinaabe, the people of this area, as well as the Lakota and the Dakota Sioux, all have a version of the medicine wheel that we see here. It really essentially represents a miniature model of the everything in the universe. You can see there's four equal quadrants, and this diagram shows that a couple of the things that each of the different quadrants represent. And so there's a lot of different things, the four directions, the four seasons, the four stages of life, the four sacred medicines, tobacco, cedar, sage, and sweetgrass. But the colors also represent something, and it represents the four types of people on the earth. So you can see that the north, represents the color white as well as the white-skinned people, and the yellow represents the yellow-skinned people or the people of the Far East, like the Asians. The red quadrant represents the indigenous peoples of the world, and the black represents the black-skinned people of the world. So because there's four equal quadrants representing every different person equally, really this medicine wheel is the basis, the foundation, the core of the Native American spiritual belief structure, and it is essentially built on equality. So when people come to our ceremonies who are of different culture, different race, or different belief structure, they are welcomed in and they are honored for what they believe. And not all other belief structures have the same type of teachings within their beliefs. But as far as the natives go, we know we have no teachings saying that our way is better than anyone else's, or that somebody else should learn our ways over their own ways. In fact, it's quite the contrary, where people are encouraged to find out their own personal history, their family's history, where they come from, what their culture consists of, and how they can learn from that in their own lives. Also, there are many ceremonies and different aspects in our culture where anybody is accepted into it, and there's really no conditions to that. So, ceremonies that we have, such as the sun dance or the sweat lodge, will welcome people of any color or any background who want to participate in there, because the foundational beliefs of these ceremonies are that anybody who comes to these ceremonies were brought there by the Creator, and they're allowed to participate and they are treated well. Their questions are answered if they have any questions. And this belief structure is one of the most inclusive beliefs that I've ever come across. There was this law that was just passed in 1978 that made it legal for us to be able to practice our belief structure. It was decriminalized in 1974, but before that, it was actually made illegal by the United States government for us to do our ceremonies, to practice the sweat lodge, to have Indian names, to do any of our spiritual things. And as a result of that attempted cultural genocide, I was personally raised as a Catholic. I personally learned the legends that go along come from the Bible and the teachings of the church. And I found that, it's really not the inclusive way, because, Catholics believe that if you're going to go to heaven, well, there's only one way to do it. And so, in my search for the truth and the beliefs, I was led back to my personal cultural ways, and I started learning about the native ways when I was, around 15 years old. Up before then, I was just a Catholic. I went to church, I went to Bible school, I went to all those different things. I was an altar boy, everything. But since I've found this, it's really changed my life for the positive, and I've really learned to look at different parts of the world in a more inclusive manner, and to see myself as a part of nature, because that's in our belief structures that we're all a part of this nature and we have a place within it. Whereas the biblical teachings tell us that God gave man dominion over the land to do with it as they please. And if you look at what's going on in the environment and stuff like that, perhaps that is a major contributor to the state that our environment is in currently. So, when speaking about equality and inclusion, I use this model a lot in my cultural competency trainings, because it really helps people to see what the real core foundations of the Native belief structure really consists of. Since there seems to be a lot of stereotypes and superstitions revolving around the belief structure of Native people. And so we have always had this medicine wheel has been part of our belief structure since the beginning of time, arguably 30,000 years ago, maybe even longer. And we had this before we even knew that there were other people in the world, before we even knew the white people or the yellow people or even the black people. We had this system set up. And so when the other people were introduced to our continent here, we knew that they were a part of this creation. And so the way history kind of went down in this continent really didn't favor the peacekeepers, favored more or less those who were part of the war and the conquering. But I believe that this structure here and this thing can really have an impact and be a part of the healing and the bringing together of people within this country in a good way. Because when we look at what's going on in our country today, there's a lot of division with the Black Lives Matter. I mean, they have a real reason that they feel that they need to say that. With what Colin Kaepernick is doing, bringing attention to the subject in the field, a lot of white people don't like that, and there's a there's a message in America about white supremacy and white privilege. There is systemic racism built into almost every aspect to the American culture and society. And so, if we're going to heal from this and really bring about the equality and the inclusion that America states that it is built on, that it's for the people, I think that this is a good model, a good way to start, a good way to show and demonstrate that all people are here, and they all have a place within the circle, and they all have an equally important part of it. And to be able to honor and respect all different people for what they can bring to the table. The seven sacred grandfather teachings are the other main aspect of the Anishinaabe culture. And they are all represented by an animal, and each of these animals represent a specific spirit that is behind it. And so these are the animals that represent these is the beaver represents wisdom, the turtle represents the truth, the wolf represents humility, the bear represents courage, the Bigfoot represents honesty, the buffalo represents respect, and the eagle represents love. And each one of these can be utilized and applied in everyday life. I talk about all this stuff in more depth in my book, The Path of Purpose, which is available on Amazon.com and also on eBay, if you want to know more about how each of these are represented. I'll end this by talking about the wolf teaching. The grandfather teaching of the wolf is that they represent humility. And even though they're one of the toughest animals in the forest, they're really the only animal in the whole forest that can't survive by itself. All the little animals in the forest, the raccoons and the beavers and the squirrels and all these other little animals, they can all survive by themselves. But the wolf is the only one that cannot survive by itself. The idea of the lone wolf is a myth. Wolves survive and thrive in a pack by relying on one another. They all respect each other's strengths and they all depend on each other. The fastest, strongest wolf in the whole pack can't bring down a deer by itself. But if he stops and asks for help and howls and all the rest of the pack answers, then they can all eat together and bring down the wolf or the moose or anything. It's very often that even the strongest wolf can't even catch a rabbit by himself. So the lesson that the wolf gives us is that if we all work together, we can all survive and thrive and be strong together. But we have to have the humility in order to ask for help and respect one another's beliefs and strengths so that we can all thrive together. Thank you for listening. Thank you means miigwech in Anishinaabe language, and my contact information is here if there's any questions, comments, or feedback. And so I wish you a good day.